tune in and learn how to make stunning reports like that on screen now in Power BI. Power BI is a fundamental tool for data analysis, and today we're going to cover the fundamentals. Let's start here with some data in Excel. As you'll see here, I've created some artificial sales data. We've got the customer ID as the unique identifier for each customer. We have the product, everything from shoes to tops, food and drinks. Whether it was a priority shipping item, the revenue, and you'll note there's some missing values here, the cost of the item, and the order date. Equally, we have the customer with the same IDs, their name, and the customer contact information. Let's load this into Power BI and see what information is hidden within this data. Once you're in Power BI, there's a few ways to import. You can do this directly from a SQL server or from Excel. Now equally, your data may be stored in a CSV. In that case, you can go up here to Get Data, Text CSV. Click this. After navigating to my sales data, which I'd stored on my desktop, I'll press Load, and here you'll see the navigator. Now, which tables do we want to import? Well, we want both the customer and the order. Now, there's two things you can do here. Either load them straight in or transform the data. We'll get to transform in a minute. It's a vital step, but let's just load it for now. It'll take a moment, but once in here, there's a large amount of things you can do. And if you've used Excel before, I'm sure you're familiar with this setup. It's a Microsoft product. You can create new pages here and rename them by double-clicking. The beauty of Power BI is that it can be shared online and visualized both on a mobile layout and on a desktop. It's great for reporting insights to various stakeholders within your organization. And the true power of this comes in its interactive nature, with slices and so forth. We'll get into that soon. But let's start with this report. If I zoom out here by holding Control and scrolling, you'll see, as a minor note, this has snapped to the top. That will be the default. As a personal preference of mine, before we get into the true details, I like to go up here and to the canvas settings to make sure the alignment is middle. On the far right hand side, you'll see both our tables, both customers and orders. And within each of these other columns, you'll see we've got customers, customer ID, and so forth. So here's the data. Here's all the different visualizations you can do, from bar charts, pie charts, and more. And here are some filters you can add to those. Equally, at the top bar here, we can see various different areas from home to insert. Again, all very similar to Excel, even adding in various shapes. You can use this to change the design of your report. But if we look here, report view, table view, and model view, we're currently in the report view. If I click on table view, you'll see it displays the data in a more familiar setting in this tabular format of rows and columns. And we can switch which one we're looking at. Now we can use this to alter our data. Now, why would you want to do that? As I'm sure you're aware, data is not always clean. In fact, it rarely is. There may be new things you want to add to it, such as averages, new insights to gain from it. Equally, there's a lot of missing data here. You might want to remove that or impute those values. Equally, I could remove a column altogether, or even just rename it. You'll see there's a spelling error there. To rename things, it's relatively straightforward. You would just double click and rename. Done. We'll get to the transformation in a bit. Next, let's move on to model view. These two tables are linked. Power BI will automatically try and link them for you. How will it do that? You'll see here it realized the customer ID in this table is the same as the customer ID in this table. Now, if there was something else you wanted to match on, you would just drag it over. Now, in our case, we don't want to, and it's great that it's picked up there as a relationship here. So we can leave that. Now, we've got our data and we want to transform it using the PowerQuery editor. How do we do that? Back to this top ribbon in the home page, you'll find Transform Data. Let's click that now, and we'll be brought to this PowerQuery editor, similar to as I'd shown you before. Let's go over to the orders table. You'll note every change I made is tracked on the sidebar here. You can see I renamed a column. If I click to the step before that, it'll go back to when the naming was different. You can even delete the step entirely. This makes it good for forensic tracking and a log of what you've done with your data. Let's take a look here. What kind of things may I want to do? One very simple element is replacing values. Now in here, if I go up to click on this, you can see the data type. It's identified here that this is textual data, whereas this is decimal, and this is a whole number. You can change it by clicking on any of these here. You'll notice picked up this was a date, which is great. A lot of what you're going to want to do is within this transform here. So back to replacing the values, we can click up here. Not only that, but we could also right click and scroll down to either remove duplicates, remove errors, and so forth, even replace values. Now you can see we have yes and no. What if I wanted to change yes with an uppercase, just Y as a lowercase, and press OK? You'll see it makes that change throughout the whole data set. Equally, I've changed my mind about that. I'll just delete the step altogether. Again, the same with duplicates. There's a lot of duplicates here with yeses and nos. If we remove that, it's just one each. One other thing I may want to do is split this into two columns. And I'll do that by going to the transform and here split column. I can split it on the delimiter, so I can do every time there's a comma or so forth. Equally, and remember this is very similar to Excel, I could do it by the number of characters. So on the first character, I want to split into a new column entirely. We could filter this by clicking here and going to just the null values and identifying just those rows. How do I remove that row entirely? Now, if you go to home and remove columns or remove rows, you can see you can remove the top or bottom, alternative, duplicate, or errors. Now, this is a problem. I don't want to remove the top or the bottom. I want to remove this specific row here. How would I do that? Well, I could right click on the top here, and from there, change it to ascending, whereby putting the null at the top, and then ultimately go back to home and remove the top row. Resolved. You'll now see when I click here, there are no null values, which means I can change the title. To remove specific rows or to impute the values, you'd have to use a measure and or DAX. We'll get to that shortly. For now, we've covered the fundamentals of applying steps, changing them, and going between the different elements of a table. You can drag around the columns as well to change that. You can see here that the customer contact is all just null values, so I'm going to remove that altogether. Once I'm happy with the steps I have made, I'm going to close and apply. We can get into creating the report, adding in the visualizations and the interactivity as we see fit. I did mention DAX. That stands for Data Analysis Expressions. What is that? It's a more advanced element of Power BI, but it's very useful for creating measures and calculated columns to delivering insights from your dataset. Let's work on a measure now using DAX. Let's press revenue. I will right click and then create a new measure. I don't want to call this measure. I want to call it total revenue. Now, what do I want this to be equal to? Similar to a function within Excel, we'll start with the sum, and you'll see it started writing out for us. We can hit tab, and there you go. I want to know the sum of the revenue. There are two words here. It starts off with orders, that is the name of the table, and then revenue, the name of the field or the column. If we round this off with a bracket here, you'll see it'll load in and add as a new field there. You can either drag it in or just press the tick, and here we go. Now, I didn't necessarily want this as a visualization. You can see it's defaulted here to a sort of bar graph. I just want it in a table, or equally as a card. That is the total revenue. What if I wanted the total revenue set as a table by product? Let's drag that above here, and there you go. you can start to see how powerful DAX can be for creating measures within Power BI. Now, measures are different to columns. Columns are when you go into here, you can create an entirely new column within your data model here. You can do this with calculated column. It's using the same principles, but for each line, it calculates it here. Measures are when you don't want to create an entirely new column within the data model in each table. You just want to work out a calculation. Like I said, you could have done this implicitly. So I could have clicked on product here, dragged in the revenue, and I've got the sum of revenue there. Some things are harder to compute and wouldn't come up as a basic average, sum, minimum, maximum, and so forth. And so for that, you would create a measure. Let's go back over to the home and transform data. Now with the columns, here we'll look at the customers data. We can add column. There's a variety of things we can do here. We can also add from example, which means say I wanted the first letter of each name. I can look at here and write J. Underneath this, T. And it'll try and pick up the pattern. You see, it hasn't quite figured it out yet, so I'll keep giving examples. T, C, and there you go. It's figured out for me that I want the first letter of each name. Press OK, and a new column has been created. It's even given it the name first characters and assigned it the correct data type. Let's go back over to our orders data and create a custom column. And what we'll do for profit, for each row here, we will do the revenue minus the cost. Okay, and there you go. Now we can get to the fun bit, the visualization. Let's go over to here, and I want to, and we'll stick with the orders here. I want to know the total revenue. You can do a variety of things here. Perhaps I've changed my mind. I want the average, this being the median, or the variance in the revenue. I can change the size of it just like this by clicking the side here. I can move it around. And I could also click on it and head over to this page here to format my visual. You'll have two tabs here, visual and general. We can remove elements. We could change the color, the bold, and so forth. If we go to general, we can add a title. And we could say we want that title to be. Now this is really where Power BI shines. There's a high amount of customizability. And what people tend to do is they'll insert backgrounds. You can do this with a simple shape. Let's add a rectangle here. We'll give our rectangle a little drop shadow. In general, effects, shadow. Already looking quite nice. In fact, I might want to add a title. Insert title, and I'll just put sales data, and we'll leave that as bold. Making sure to select the text first. Let's add something quickly. I want to introduce you to a slicer. Here it is. With a slicer, you can drag in elements into the fields, such as, let's do here, product. Brilliant. And again, this is all customizable. You'll note there are some blanks, so we could have removed that, as you'd seen before. But then when we add something in, such as let's say we want this stacked bar chart here, and I want it by cost, by priority shipping. Let's resize that. You can see when something isn't priority shipping, it often costs more. This is by the sum of the cost. I don't want that, I want the average. It's actually a lot more similar when it comes to an average. But I don't want to look at all products, I just want to look at shoes. And now there is a clear difference. In food, even more so. Let's try another visualization here. What I will say is that Power BI is AI powered, meaning, as you saw earlier, it can figure things out, trends on its own. It can also write you a narrative of findings on your page and come up with insights of its own. You'll see that here. Q&A and smart narrative. The rest of these elements are simple charts. Some of these you may be familiar with, such as a pie chart here. Some less so, such as a ribbon chart. There. We can move this all around. Now, what I would tend to recommend is that you use the different pages for different elements in your reporting. Now, this page, I may want everything to do with orders, and on this page, everything to do with customers. We can do the count of customer ID, for example. Rather than being a table, let's just do a count distinct. We can see we have 99. As before, it's important to remember that it's entirely interactive and will update with each element you click, even if it's not in a slicer, but in the visualization itself. It's a very powerful tool. Everything can be moved around, resized, and so forth. You can even customize it with the colors. I don't quite like this slicer, for example, because I just don't like how it's laid out. Let's go to the slicer settings and make it a tile. Maybe a drop down. That's better for me. I also don't particularly like there being a header, and I also don't want the background. You can add a bunch of slices down here on the side. What I'll show you now on the screen is a report I've created previously using data I sourced from Kaggle. This shows the depth and breadth you can really get into within your analysis. I would just download it and have a play. Let's add a text box here to describe some of our insights. Or we can get into our smart narrative. Pressing that will create a narrative using AI to tell you everything that is on the page, all the key insights it's found. If we go to Q&A, looking at all the different elements you've added, it can think of things you may want to know. Perhaps you want to know what is the total revenue by customer name. Let's press that. It'll take a second to load. Here. I quite like this visualization. I can see Cameron has the highest revenue. So what I'll do is I'll turn this into a standard visual and add it to my page here. Again, I want to look at just food. Additional formatting. Let's add a visualization here. We'll do the number of products by revenue. If we zoom in a little bit here, what we can do here is go down the values and click conditional formatting. We'll do this with background color, and the lowest value, we'll change that to green. Whereas the highest value will be red. Okay, and there's the change. Equally, if you press this, you can order it from ascending and also descending. You can do this within visualizations also. So let's drag this over here, do cost by priority shipping, and we'll go over here to format your visualization, bars, FX, and the same applies. You can do whatever color you'd like. Finally, we'll go back over calculated columns because I don't feel I covered it in enough depth. What you're going to want to do instead for a calculated column is go over to the table view here. Next, you'll find a button called New Column. And again, you can do measures as well. Let's just call this column Profit. What we're going to do here is similar to a measure, is we're going to do the revenue, start to type it, minus the cost. Hit enter, and it's as simple as that. A really powerful tool. I highly recommend using this. All the best to everyone, and good luck.